here's what we know. None of us are perfect, which means none of the churches that we lead will be perfect. And so because of that, we always want to strive to get better. And so in this episode of Practical Church Planting, we're going to share with you 5 hopes that we have for the church in the next 10 years.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian. With me today and every day of my life is Dylan Dotson. So much. And today we're talking about 5 hopes for the church in the next 10 years.
So I want to caveat by saying that nobody's perfect, no church is perfect.
Yes.
And because of that, because we're all sinful, fallen human beings, every church is going to have issues because nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
That being said, we of course all want to be the best that we can. And so here are 5 things that would be really cool to see. And I'm saying for us at New City and just for churches in general, that it would be really cool to strive for. And maybe some of these things will resonate to you, or maybe just some things to think about as we're thinking about them here at New City. So here are 5 hopes for the church to have for the next 10 years. The first one is this. We'd love to see more women on church staffs.
Yeah.
And we're not asking people to change their theology or whatever. I mean, at New City Church, I don't know if people get mad about this. We are what you would generally call complementarian. So pastor, elder is for men at New City. That being said, we believe that men and women are gifted, that men and women should lead and use their giftings and do all the things that God wants them to do. And in my experience, and I always want to caveat this, but there's a lot of reasons why churches don't make it. There's a lot of reasons why churches close their doors, and it's not always because people didn't try hard or weren't faithful.
Yeah.
That being said, as I look at a lot of churches that are closing their doors or are declining or are plateaued, many of them either did not have any or did not have enough women on staff at all. And over 50% of the church universally is women. And if you have no women in significant roles of feedback, of leadership, of doing things, then your church, just by definition, is going to be missing out.
Yeah.
And so I would love to see, cards on the table right now, New City has 1 woman on staff.
Yep.
We would love to see more. And even with that, the woman that is on staff here, she gets more votes than we do at our staff meeting. She's more but I just think that if you have I know in church planning world it can be hard if it's just you and one other person, but if you've got more than 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people, and you don't have a single woman on staff, that should concern you. Now, granted, you can't always control that, and I totally get it, but that should concern you if you have no women in significant roles, in significant meaning staff.
Yes, and I would say this is tough because there's nothing wrong with these positions, but I would say significant also in a sense of not just leading women's ministry and not necessarily, and not that this is a bad thing, but also not just that their only option is someone to lead kids.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong, obviously, if you have one woman and she leads kids and that's what you have for now, then it's okay. It's not like that's a bad thing, but it's not like that's the only option for them, or that's the only thing that they have any say in. Like you said, I'm glad you said it. We have 1 woman on staff, which I think we both agree isn't enough, and it's something that we're trying. But one thing that's been really helpful, and it's not like we want them to be the token woman in the room that just to bring a woman's perspective, and that's the only thing that they're useful for. But one thing that has been real helpful is there's been a lot of things that we've wanted to do or talked about doing that then to get a woman's perspective to then say hey, this is a bad idea. This is how this will be interpreted, or this is how it'll come across to women, to where I never, and that's true, but that never even crossed my mind, and that wouldn't cross my mind being a man. And so it's just, there's so many benefits. It's hard to just encapsulate it in a minute, but there's so many benefits. I think it's
so I just you're saying, be cognizant of it, actually be intentional about it, because it won't happen by accident. We would just love to see more women on New City staff and other church staff. I think, again, we're not trying to tell someone to change their conviction, but all of our churches would be better for it. So that's one. Number 2, we'd love to see more cross-denominational and or cross-network support.
Yeah, for sure.
What we mean is not just the people in your network, your denomination, your tribe, or whatever, working together, but actually being open to others. We're part of Acts 29, and we had the global gathering this past July, which happens every 2 years, that my wife and I were able to go to. And one of the cool things that was prayed for from stage and we talked about is being a network that's known for our loved, and praying. And for me personally, it means praying for other churches in Raleigh where we are that are not part of our network, because at the end of the day, we want to see people meet Jesus, grow a relationship with him, and be more open. I get there are certain times where that can be hard, but if you have no relationships with any churches that aren't exactly like you, I think we're missing something there.
Yeah.
And yeah, we would love to see that happen more often.
Yeah. What I was going to say, kind of similar, what I was going to say is we're part of Acts 29, and we do have regional meetings as well in the Raleigh-Durham area. And one thing they've always encouraged is to invite other planters and church leaders and things to it too. And I think that can be interpreted as like, oh, we want to recruit them for Acts 29. And well, I think there's some aspect of if it's a new planter not involved in a network, obviously we want to help them out and want to talk to them. But I also think it's has a lot to do with just we want to build relationships with people, and we don't want it to be our team versus their team, and we have just this tribe, and then there's other ones, but we don't really associate with them. We're all the church, and like we want to be involved with each other and not just have our things be just for us.
Yep. Yeah. And so again, just the personal challenges. Did you know any other churches or pastors in your town that are not your denomination or your network? And if not, just reach out, ask how you can be praying for them, see how they're doing. But we're not going to do better in showing unity and love in our city if we're only with the churches that are exactly like us.
Yeah.
Number 3, love to see more church planting churches. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, either you are planting a church, and if you are planting a church, hopefully you want to plant more churches.
Yeah.
But that's just the biggest way to get out to not be about yourself is to be about planting other churches. I feel like if you're a church that cares about planting other churches, not only will you be more generous with your own people and with your own money and your own resources, but you'll be more generous to others that move into the area, that you won't be so defensive about what you're doing. I feel like if you actually are into church planting and not just talking about it, but want to see it happen, the defensiveness of like, well, you can't plant a church near me, or these are my people, like it goes away. And I think the biggest way this happens is actually caring more about the mission than yourself, like actually caring about that. But I think if we see that more, again, if you're listening to this point, probably doesn't make much of a make much of a difference or resonates with you. But if you wanted to plant a church, I want to say make sure that your church is not the goal.
Yeah.
Like we've always said this from the beginning, and we do because we believe it, not because it was like this nice thing to say. Like for me, New City Church has never been the goal. The goal is never to have a self-sustaining church and a few staff and like your own building, and then you just like that's never the goal. The goal is to reach people for Jesus. And so we would just love to see churches be more intentional about it. And if you are a church planter, be focusing and knowing that your church plant itself is not the goal, but rather how can you be involved in continuing this on after your church is planted?
Yeah, I think one way to do that, and hopefully if you're watching this podcast or listening to it, I would assume that you would agree with this, but you never know. But one way to do this is to have it be part of your regular language. One thing I appreciate about New City is ever since before launching, the idea of planting churches has always been kind of common vocabulary. In other words, it's not something we talk about 24/7, but it's not foreign to anybody. That's what we want to do. Part of it, I mean, one aspect, and I will say we did get a little lucky. We do have somebody who from before launch has been here who plans to plant a church.
Yep.
So, and some of that did kind of, came down to not luck, God's providence, obviously, but some stuff
we
that
didn't
we
do
didn't
anything.
do, stuff that we didn't do. So it's hard to give advice on that aspect. But even without him, we haven't just said, his name's Adam, we haven't just said our plan from day one is to plant Adam somewhere and our focus is on Adam. It's just been we want to plant churches. We don't care if they're across the other part of the state or if they're here. We want to be involved in planting churches.
Right.
And so when that happens, and now that we're actually working on it, and when it actually happens, it's not something that we have to kind of blindside people with. And it's not something that people are kind of surprised and unsure what this means. It's just something that's common knowledge. It's something that we want to do.
Right. And again, we were fortunate in the sense that we have a God that wants to plant, hopefully within the next year or two.
Yeah.
But we haven't, but until that happens, we ourselves have not planted church.
Yeah, true.
But we want to do it. And so one of the things that we were able to do, since we do set money aside for church planting, is recently we had a guy who preached here on a Sunday who's planting like in our county, essentially.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to show people, hey, we not only do we want to see churches planted, but we actually care about it so much that we don't care where it is, specifically in our own town and in our own area. I think that's the biggest impact that you can make for your people is somehow, some way celebrating, praying for, or planting other churches, not just other places, but in your own town, or really show your people, oh, they actually really do care about this. Because in one sense, they could say, well, of course you want to plant someone in another state over. That has nothing to do with us. But it was really cool for us to be able to celebrate and to give generously to the planter that was here. I think it really showed our people, oh, I know that we talk about like New City isn't the main thing, but we actually were able to see that.
And that's a good point. Another thing with that is the guy who came in and had to preach here that we gave money to, he was in no way affiliated with New City. They were part of Acts 29, but they were to our people that are sitting here, he is in no way affiliated with us. In other words, he's not a staff member we're sending out or someone that you'd assume that we'd be giving money to, but he was someone who are people I've never met, never seen, who came in, preached, and we gave money to. And to them, that was their first time ever hearing of him. And so this wasn't like something that, obviously be giving money to them because we support them and they go to our church or things like that. This is something that we have no vested interest in, or people wouldn't think we did, but still. And so that just helps keep the importance of church planting on people's minds.
Yeah, so more church planting churches.
Yeah.
Number 4, if you've been following us for a while or this show for a while, probably won't be a surprise to you. Love to see better online engagement.
Yeah.
Now we had a recent episode that just came out on 7 tips for better social media use. We've got various ones that you can look up from our previous episodes. And what really gets me about this, it's not that some churches do it better than others.
Yeah.
To me, what it comes down to is actually caring. We're talking about social media. We're talking about your website. We get that you have different abilities of the people at your church. You have different amount of money. But I think what really gets me is the churches that maybe, like, let's say, for example, big multi-site churches that I know, and their social media presence is terrible. Mm-hmm. Like it's just not good. I'm like, clearly you have the money. Or other church plants, small churches that just wave the white flag and say, well, we'll get to it later.
Yeah.
People, like, if you want to reach people that are under 30, which everybody does, you have to care. And part of the way to get better at your online engagement is listen to some of our episodes to help.
Yeah.
No,
sure.
Totally kidding. I mean, I think they'll help.
No, I mean, yeah.
But it's to just start with something and to try. Like, you don't know what works or what doesn't work if you do nothing. And so I just get really frustrated at the churches who, it appears, don't even put an effort forth. It's not that they have lack of resources or lack of trying, it's that they're not even trying, which literally shows, it's literally shouting to people that we don't care. Now, I want to be clear here because personally, I can sometimes make social media be too important.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, it's about relationships and loving people and bringing people closer to Jesus, and social media can only do so much. But it is a great first step that so many churches are missing out on. Even church planners that I talk to, it's like, I get that this is not what you're good at, but it doesn't even seem like you think it's a priority because you just assume, well, I'm not good at it. Like, you've got to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think it depends a lot of the reason that you're doing it. Or I guess you need to look at the reason you're doing it. In other words, I think a lot of people, the reason they don't do it is because maybe they have a problem with social media, or they think that people spend too much time on social media, or they're older and so it's just for younger people and they don't want to learn, just things like that. And I think, like, yeah, there's a lot of, I think, legitimate issues with social media. I think that we do spend too much time on it, and I don't by any means think it's the greatest thing in the world, and think that there are serious problems. But I also know that this is where people are, and that it's not inherently a sinful thing. In other words, we're not going to do things that are inherently sinful just to reach people, but this is something that's a neutral platform, and it's where people are, and it's going to get much more. I mean, it's bigger, it's going to get much bigger as it's not going to go away. And so to ignore it, I think, is really just doing people, and not just your people, but just people, injustice. I think this is where people are, and we owe it to them to engage them where they are, and not expect them to come to where we want them to be.
Right. And again, you can think it's too important than it is. Yeah. But in my experience, people are just like, we just want to preach the gospel and reach people, and they just think that social media doesn't help that. Yeah. And it doesn't actually replace a face-to-face conversation.
Sure. No,
all these sorts of things, but it does open them up way more, and gives people a feel for what your church is like. And so I would just say, if you're not sure, listen to some of our episodes and just try. Maybe just try Facebook, or just try Instagram, or just try to make sure your website is up to date. Like, just put an effort forth and see what might happen.
Yeah, and I would say try and fail, and that's fine. Like, if we look back at our social media, we've done plenty of things that weren't good, that didn't work, that look bad, that we shouldn't have, maybe we shouldn't have done, whatever. And I see other churches do that too. I love seeing churches that, like, they post something and I think, what in the world are you thinking? But that's a good thing, because they're trying something different and not just doing the same things. And so I would say, don't sit here and wait until you have this perfect strategy laid out and know everything about it and take all these classes on social media, whatever. Do that stuff if you want to, but just start doing something, even if it's not good.
Yeah.
Just
so better online engagement. And the last is less politics.
Yeah.
And what we mean is, like, there's tension, because we're not saying that you shouldn't speak up to injustices, especially we're white. We have a predominantly white church. Like, we should speak up when things are going around. But what especially also with, I mean, let's just be honest, the current president, and how a lot of conservative evangelicals talked about how morals mattered, and then the president comes in, it's like they justify everything. Like, it's one thing to talk about politics, another thing, like, literally, like, okay, this is evil, or this is whatever. I'm not going to talk about the current president, other politicians, whatever.
Totally.
Like, being more infatuated with who's in office and who's in power than doing what is important, and not how to put it this way, not worshiping politics greater than Jesus. And we have an election coming up, and I think it's on pastors and church leaders to remind their people, like, don't just get mad at your people when they say stupid things, but to remind people what is most important, and Jesus is most important. And so, yes, there are times where we speak into injustices and moral evil that is going on, but we never sacrifice wanting to get our candidate into office over what we're actually doing. And we realize when we post things on Facebook and social media, we say things from the stage, that if we're being negative and denigrating to a different political affiliation than we have, for no other reason other than just to like say how I can't believe people think this, you're alienating tons of people.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, obviously we're not Jesus, but he had a tax collector and he had a zealot. They were completely opposite politically. Like they could not be farther apart from each other.
Yeah.
But they were united in Jesus. And so I would just like to see all of us figure out how to speak when we need to speak, but ultimately not let our politics and our political desires for what we want in the country, because we all have political affiliations or things that we want to vote, things we want to see happen. But being more concerned about seeing people meet Jesus than our preferred candidates be voted into office would be a great first step for some of us sometimes.
I got a lot to say on this, but I won't because we're already over 15 minutes. But yeah, I agree. And I like that you made that distinction. In other words, we don't want to be talking so much about politics, but there are certain things we can't ignore. And I've seen, and we've all seen, this isn't just me, but like we've all seen so many things happen in our country that should be addressed that doesn't get addressed. And it's like, it's almost painfully obvious. Like you need to say something about this and nothing is being said.
Yeah.
So, and we've had times where, which I've appreciated, where Dylan has got up and like you said, we are white. We are as white as they come. And we have a predominantly white church. And where Dylan's got up here and said like, hey, these are some issues with some very clearly racist issues that are going on because of current, situations and things that we need to be aware of. And we, especially as mostly white people here, we need to be aware of what's going on out there. We can't ignore what's going on just because it doesn't necessarily isn't against us, in other words.
Right.
So those kind of things, I don't think either of us are saying by any means shy away from. But yeah, the talk about who's getting elected, and especially even more so, I don't really hear much like verbal pastors and things talking about it, but like you said, just on social media, I think is huge. And the things you share, like people as a pastor or church staff, or whatever, people watch you more than anybody else or more than most. And so the things that you share or the things that you post, it's influencing people and it's affecting people, and very rarely and probably never for the good, you know, even if you have the greatest political views on the planet, whatever, but you sharing these things is alienating to people and is coming across in different ways. And these are things that it's fine to have personal convictions about. It's fine to have personal thoughts about, but it's not okay as a pastor, in my opinion, to be influencing people in this way.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing.
And again, it's a tension, because then how do you know when you're allowed to say something when you're not?
It's tough.
I think it comes down to, and you know this, what is your heart and your motivation for saying this?
Yeah.
Like, are you really, because you really think that this economic plan is the best for the country, and obviously you think it, but you want people to believe what you think is right? Or like, is it because you just want to maybe passively aggressively tell people that they should vote for what you should vote?
Yeah.
Like, is what you're posting actually out of love? And do you understand, even when you do need to take a stand, that you will alienate some people? And is it worth what you're about to do?
Yeah, and I would hope that you recognize that there's people, especially if you're a pastor, there's people in your congregation that vote similar to you and that don't. No matter who you are, that's going to happen. And so I'd hope anything that you're posting or saying, you look at it through that lens of, if someone doesn't agree with me and I still love them because they're a human and I love, and I should love people. If I look at it through their eyes, how are they going to view this?
Right.
And if they view it as this is going to come across as attacking them, or this is going to come across as not loving to them because of potentially just the way they vote or just the way that they believe or the way they are, as long as we're not talking about sinful issues, but if the things that I'm posting is coming across that way to people, then obviously, is it something that needs to be?
And let's just be honest, most of the passive-aggressive posts about politics are in response to somebody's post that you saw. So just message the person and don't make everyone else mad.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.